I recently enjoyed a heartwarming and just plain fun video visit with the granddaddy of internet shooting personalities, Hickok 45. I am a fan and regular follower of the gun reviews, shooting demos, and opinion videos he and his son publish on Rumble, YouTube, and Patreon. Alarmingly, just days after I chatted with him, YouTube banned a number of his videos alleging violations of their newly expanded policies against gun advertising. So let's say right up front, the great wealth of 15 years of video archives about guns, shooting, and the armed lifestyle have been moved to Rumble, and those are linked in the show notes below. And because we like to support our own, we recommend his work on Patreon as well. The summer's unpleasantness over YouTube came as a surprise. I know Hickok 45 and his son, having enjoyed meeting them at a NRA Annual Meeting several years ago, and it's hard to believe they had violated their agreement. Over the weeks that followed, it was relief to see new videos on their YouTube channels, but it was also deeply disheartening to see many of the older videos removed. Fortunately, most of them were archived over on Rumble, where I noticed recently there is 111 pages of titles that let fans go back and view videos from the past 15 years. Still, losing YouTube's reach into the general public is disheartening because it reaches a larger audience. And it encompasses viewers from many walks of life, many of whom haven't made the decision to become gun owners yet, but they really want to know how guns work. Hickok 45's videos showing responsible, safe, and fun shooting experiences make him a tremendous ambassador for armed citizens. It's trite to introduce today's interview by saying the man for whom no introduction is needed. But seriously, the reach of Hickok 45 is so much greater than ours that kind of fits. The network members will be happy to join me, and members and viewers on the outside chance you don't know this gentleman, meet Hickok 45. Welcome, sir.
Hi, good to meet you. Good to see everybody. Gila, good to talk to you.
Well, to start, I'm interested in how you became an armed citizen and when and why you started making videos about guns.
Well, that's a couple of questions. I'm not sure where I found the network. Tell you the truth, it's been 6 or 8 years ago. I just don't remember how I first heard about the network, but it might have been through Mossy or something, and that's what impressed me. The people that you worked with had on the board, the directors and everything. Guys, John Farnham and Tom Gibbons, and you're right on down the line, Mossy. And I thought, well, okay, this might be something worth looking into, and I looked into it enough, and then I enjoyed and everything, and I keep my membership up. I don't religiously read all the journals like I ought to. I go through and catch some of it, and I try to. I hope I don't have to rely on the network or any organization, and try to be smart about the way I operate. And everybody does, but you never know what could happen. But yeah, it's been 6 or 8 years ago. I discovered you all, and I thought I was impressed with what I found out. And I've met you and Marty and everything, and so I'm a member, soon for life.
Well, thank you.
But,
And going even further back, were you raised with guns? Were you part of a gun-owning family? Did you come to guns as a young man, as an adult? How did you get involved in the shooting world?
Well, as a young fellow, my dad had a rifle. I don't think he even had a shotgun. So he wasn't a shooter like I am. He wasn't an avid shooter or anything. He had been in World War II, and when I was born, he had only been back 5 years, But so he wasn't really into shooting. Just occasionally, maybe with my uncle, who was the gun and firearms enthusiast in the family, Uncle Davis. And unfortunately, he was killed on a tractor when I was 16. Otherwise, he and I would have had a long relationship shooting. But he really got me into it. And he had a gun cabinet full of firearms. We'd go over to his place up in northern Kentucky, and that's back when people were more likely to have their firearms displayed, in a beautiful wooden case. And I remember looking into that case as a little guy and seeing those big cowboy guns is all I knew them as, the big Colt single actions and with handles. He had handles with steers cut into it, I remember, and all that kind of thing, and long guns and lever actions. And we'd shoot them a little bit, and I was pretty young, but that's where I got it. And then we bought a farm when I was about 10 and moved out to Grant County, Kentucky. Had 50 acres, and it was very rural, very rural to say the least. And that's where my dad bought his first pistol. My mother bought it for him for Christmas, and I was 10. As a little Sentinel Revelation 22, revolver, and we had he already had a rifle, Ward's Western Field. I have both those firearms now, and I was able to go out on those 50 acres when I was 11 or 12, and just carry those firearms and shoot them, and have a pocket with not full probably because it was expensive, but 22 ammunition, and just walk around in those woods just like I do now and fire at things and dead trees or whatever, and hunt. I didn't do much hunting, but I was able to do whatever I wanted, and so I got the bug then. You can imagine me at 11 or 12, and that was quite unusual by today's standards to just walk around and shoot and have the land to do that. And then we moved back to the city, moved back and forth some different things and all that. And I lost that capability to some extent, but I never forgot it. And when I got out of college, actually before I graduated, I actually bought my first, I had a little money, a little bit of a windfall, and I was a senior, and I went to a gun store in Clarksville, Tennessee, where I was in college at Austin Peay. And I was about to graduate, and I'd always wanted a Colt 45. That was my uncle in me. And I didn't know what, I just went in and I think I paid I don't know, it seemed like $150. I could look it up. It may have been $69 or something. But I bought a Ruger Blackhawk in 45 Colt. It was the old model at the time. It was 73. But when I went in, I remember being intimidated, and I've never forgotten that. A lot of people tell me that online, maybe younger people, young ladies or whoever, about how intimidated they are in gun shops, and sometimes for very good reason. It's not just because of their ignorance of firearms at that point. It's because of some crusty old guy that is impatient with them. And that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't know. I just knew I'd seen all the cowboy shows, and I wanted a Colt 45. And so this guy, immediately, he said, well, that doesn't tell me anything. You're looking for a Colt, you're looking for a Ruger, you're looking for something else. I didn't even know there was anything else chambered in 45 Colt at the time. I was very ignorant. Probably still am, but so anyway, I bought it. It was a Ruger. I didn't know Ruger. I didn't know what that company was or anything, but I had a 45 Colt, and of course, nice gun, Blackhawk, Ruger Blackhawk. That was my first really nice gun, and large caliber and center fire. So I was hooked, of course, and then I went on to buying more firearms. And as I was working and teaching, my first job, it wasn't rich, but I was able to, save up and buy a Smith & Wesson Model 29, and then firearms like that.
Now we're
That's
talking.
where I really got into it in the early 70s.
Yeah. So you were, I knew, I think I knew from watching you or maybe from meeting you that you were an educator. In fact, I noticed you had a cool little clip about a 44 Magnum revolver here a few shows back, and you used the comment, it made me chuckle, Kentucky arithmetic when you're calculating how many years you'd owned that gun. I just cracked up when you said that. But when you were teaching, did you kind of keep your love of guns under wraps, or was it okay to talk about that during, in the workplace and in those days?
I didn't have to keep it too much under wraps. I was, when I was graduating, I put my resume out, and everything in the area of Tennessee and Kentucky, northern Tennessee and southern Kentucky, and I was 73, spring of 73, and I had a couple of options. One was actually teaching soldiers, I guess it was in the GED program at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I had an offer from a private school in Franklin, Tennessee, Battleground Academy. I'd never heard of it, everything. And it was, I don't know, middle of the summer or something, about this time, July, and I interviewed both places. I went down to the private school, and I wasn't familiar with it, and had no experience with private schools. but I was really impressed. And the fact that it was a private school, fairly conservative, it had been a boarding school. It was started in 1889 and still in operation, of course. It had gotten bigger and bigger. But so it's kind of a conservative school, to answer your question. So I really didn't have that issue. I could talk about it. Some of my students were, it was an all boys school at the time. Some of my students were shooting. I even took some of them out shooting and hunting, and so it was kind of an ideal situation for me. And I wasn't afraid to talk about it. There was really not an anti-gun element that I was aware of anywhere. And then my longer teaching stint, I left there and was in publishing for about 10 years, medical publishing and such. And in 1990, I came back to teaching to another private school in Nashville, Franklin Road Academy, which I was kind of familiar with already from my other teaching experience. And it was a pretty conservative school too, although it was closer into Nashville. And there was a little bit of anti-gun, I know there, but it was still basically conservative. And so I was able to, I didn't promote it or anything, but if I mentioned a gun, nobody, dropped over or anything. And then I started the channel doing these videos about 5 years before I left teaching. And so,
Oh.
around 2007 or 8, and I left teaching in 2013. So people knew it. And in fact, I had to get up in the middle school assembly a couple of times and remind students because it was a high tech school. We were getting into computers and I had a laptop program I was running and all this kind of thing. And so everybody was wired in even at that time at that school. And they knew about the videos and they'd beg me at the end of the day in study hall or something to, come on, Mr. So-and-so, load up that pumpkin carving video or whatever. They knew about them and their parents knew about them. But I never did catch any flack for it. I was fortunate, mainly because of where I was teaching. If I had been probably teaching in metro system in Nashville or somewhere, you can imagine other cities, less gun-friendly cities, I might have caught a lot of flack and might have been fired just for talking about a firearm, of course. But I was blessed.
Well, I'm glad it worked out that way because the fact that you got the YouTube channel launched and have continued it has done so much for people. And one of the things that fascinates me about what you do is, and I really am interested in your thoughts about what is the crossover between self-defense guns and hobby and recreation shooting. I mean, the tools are kind of the same. And even if we consider safety, does safety change if you're a plinker or you're a competitor or if you're in self-defense gun training and practice? What is the overlap and what is the conflict between that very serious side of what we do and what I would hope and what I think you do such a great job of leading us into the fun side of it?
Well, trying to choke myself on iced tea. Yeah, it's really two different worlds in a lot of ways. Of course, we know they do overlap, and I think what we do mainly our forte with the videos, my son and me, John and I, is more the fun side probably. If you go through the videos and watch a lot of them, you're going to see just more having fun, which is. That's I guess the main drive of the channel because I'm not a ex-military or really even an ex-cop. I was a reserve deputy for 10 years. I was a volunteer, but I've never been a sworn deputy or, I've not been I've had the training we had to go through with the in-service and it was nice and I learned a lot in the county here with the deputies, but I can't claim to be an expert, cop or soldier or anything like that. So I've never veered into training. I've always avoided even pretending to be an expert in any of that at all. My only expertise is just I have a lot of experience shooting. And I like firearms from almost every genre and enjoy them. But there is overlap. And part of the reason, as I was saying, I was teaching for the first 5 years doing these videos, and I really wanted to do some things. I did have my limits. I didn't have any trouble, as I said, with parents or being worried that I was a gun guy and doing these videos or anything. But I was still a little reluctant to do too much in the way of self-defense. And it was a long time. We finally did a series a little bit on, I don't know, inside the waistband carry, I think, outside the waistband carry, or concealed carry, some videos like that, a few back then. And I even put the title, I think, legal carry or something like. I just want to make it clear that I don't do anything that's not legal. And part of that was because of my profession and what I was doing. Yeah, because I knew parents were seeing the videos too, and I also didn't want to scare them into thinking that, oh wow, Mr. So and so is probably packing a gun in school. I don't know if I like, I just had to avoid that kind of thinking. But I get into holsters. Our overlap, to kind of get to your question, I guess, is mostly talking about firearms. I guess that are good defense firearms. They fit in that category in terms of size, maybe convenience, and then holsters. The ways that I carry, like I'm well known, I guess, for pocket carry for one thing, part of the time, and then belt carry, different types of holsters, and so we don't steer away from that. I'm not an expert really in anything, but it's something people need help with. What kind of holsters, or how do you carry, or do you carry? We did a little video recently on the Hickok 45 Talks channel. I just talked about carrying with a round in the chamber or not. Those things always, those questions always come up, and and one of the things I like to do is to try to make it clear to people what a serious issue it is to carry a firearm. I mean, we have fun in every video, and I'm shooting 2 liters and clay pots, and we're just having a good time shooting firearms. That's the 99% of the activity, but not to encourage people to be too cavalier about it. Carrying a gun is, as you know, it's a serious, serious business, and especially having the mindset. That's the serious thing. Whether you have a round in the chamber and have the mindset for that, you're experienced and confident and competent, and all that is so, so, so important. And we talk to that sometimes, but I'm not the expert in that area, even though there's just naturally has to be overlap, I think.
Well, I think there does, and it's interesting. You're going to encourage me to jump ahead to a question that I had thought of, because I had particularly enjoyed one of I believe you're calling them Hickok 45 clips now, and the title was "Teaches You to Shoot," and it demonstrated follow through. It demonstrated good high firm grip. It demonstrated getting a grip in the holster. I mean, you took us right through the steps, drawing stances, trigger control. I mean, it was all in there. And then there were, like you said, videos about concealed carry holsters that were added on. But I'm wondering, I mean, I recognize so much doctrine in there. Who were your leading influences?
Well, I never really studied folks probably like I should have, and still don't. I almost that way with everything, whether it's how to tie a tie or anything. I just kind of teach myself. But yeah, I've read everything, probably every book at least, and a lot of the articles that Moss or you have written. And I've read a lot of Jeff Cooper. I've not read enough of some others, but and in competitors, when I got into competition shooting back in the later 80s and early 90s, I was, I guess, studying or watching, videos of people like Rob Latham and different things. But I've always been more interested, even when I was competing, in the practical side of firearms and carrying. I carried inside the waistband with an Alessi holster for so many years. A cocked and locked, 45, 1911, and I'm trying to think I'm not sure who was the biggest influence on me. I know Cooper and Mossayub, and I'm trying to think of some of the videos I have seen. But the Weaver stance, I read about Weaver, and just different groups, and then I just experimented kind of quickly, really. What feels best to me. So, and then I guess I use kind of a modified Weaver stance. I don't use an isosceles like a lot of people do, which is probably better for competition. I don't know. I don't worry about it a lot. I just sort of do what feels comfortable and seems to make sense to me, based on the Weaver stance and whatever. People, I think, obsess a little too much about some of that. Now in competition and that sort of thing, it's maybe more important. in some ways, ironically. If the balloon goes up, it's going to happen really fast, and you may not be in some proper stance and able to get in some proper stance and all that kind of thing. Anyway, uh, but the gun magazines and online and YouTube videos and all of us gun people, we probably obsess way too much about the grain of the bullet we're carrying and all those sorts of things. As you know, there's just so many more important factors there. But that's kind of where Jeff Cooper, Montague, and some of those characters, some of the competitors, and some of the people that I knew that I competed with locally that had good format, good stance, and most of them were kind of used in a weaver stance and that kind of that thing. Although some of the more serious competitors were doing the isosceles, were feet squared up and everything. But I never did feel as comfortable doing that. Yeah.
Well, and you've brought up something interesting, and it's almost it comes back to that overlap that's so fascinating about your approach. But when we read the prominent trainers or we go to gun school, and there's always a lot of accuracy on skill maintenance and skill development and being true to that. And we're told have something writing on each shot or use a timer to measure and track your skill. And I've always had a little trouble reconciling that against something that, again, I think you do so well, and that is the simple love of the perfect shot. And how driven are you? I mean, you're on video, for heaven's sakes, and you're saying, let me see if I can hit that pig, right?
Yeah.
And there's a silhouette out there, and a few seconds later we hear ding, and it's like, okay, he got it. But when you were competing, were you competing in IPSC in those days, or what sport did you enjoy?
I've done a lot, jack of all trades, just like with firearms. I like muzzle loaders and ARs and Glocks and everything else. My very first competition was with that 29 44 Magnum. I got into IHMSA, International Handgun Metallic Association shooting matches back in the 70s, and that's where that picture was from, the photograph I showed in that video you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then the USPSA thing, I don't know, some of the TV shows, they were showing some cowboy shooting back even in when the early 80s, maybe mid 80s. You'd see that stuff pop up on some of the shooting shows, and that looked interesting. And some of the USPSA matches looked interesting. These guys crawling through barrels and shooting out the end of the barrel. I thought that looks like fun. And so there were some matches going on up around Clarksville, Tennessee, and then we started the first USPSA chapter here in Middle Tennessee. About 6 or 7 of us, and we went and shot in the state section match. It's fun and all that, and got into it in a big way. Had a lot of fun doing that. And then after that, I don't know, I kind of exhausted myself after a few years. I was a stats person and one of the officers in the club, and you're there, and I was shooting 3 different guns in every match: revolver, open class, plus limited class. And I didn't necessarily get burned out, but I just sort of had enough of that. I went and did some IDPA, and I went and did some cowboy action shooting. I was a SAS, I shot that for about 10 years, and just moved, jack of all trades, and meanwhile, shooting here at the place, I'm looking at the range right here. And what happened to me with USPSA as much as anything is I got, pretty good at it. I'd win matches, and I placed high enough in matches, larger matches, to win a gun, several times. And I never did get the grand master class or anything. I didn't take it seriously enough. What would get me was I'd stand around at a match all day doing that, and it was fun, but I would kind of want to be home shooting my lever gun or doing something else. I missed my other firearms. And I kind of got away from the, going to those matches because you're so focused with those specific guns. And I never was like a lot of people. Like they're working, between matches really hard at reducing their split times or taking a tenth of a second off their draw stroke and that sort of thing. And I just never could get that deeply into that serious about it. I'd rather be home shooting my 45-70 lever gun or something, instead of working and working, trying to get another tenth of a second off my draw. And so I just kind of wandered around and competed. I did the GSSF matches, the Glock Shooting Foundation. I enjoyed those, and for a while I did that. I was determined to win subcompact. I carried a Glock 26 there for a period of years, and I said, man, I'd already shot a US PSA, and I was, a decent shooter, and I thought, surely I can place higher than third or fourth. And for one, I'd go up to Lexington, Kentucky, and shoot every year. And I was determined to win that subcompact class. And if you've ever shot in those matches, they're really great. There's a wide range of folks. There's great grandma who might go, shoot for the first time. You've got a lot of people who've never shot a match and they're scared to death. Then you've got whatever in each class, maybe 7 or 8 or 10 people that are USPSA competitors, and it's really tough at the top level. And so that's who I was trying to win again. I finally did in the early 90, no, early 2000s, I guess. And then I didn't go back to that. I just wanted to win with my subcompact. But I've had a lot of fun in the competition, various types of it. But the most fun I have is just grabbing a favorite firearm and going out here to my own range or walking through the woods and plinking with it. That's where I have the most fun. Yeah.
So that was cool. You said, I missed my guns while I was at the shooting match.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite platform? I mean, are you I know if somebody had to say what gun do you love the most, I'd probably say shotguns myself, but that's just for fun, not
Cool.
for not for regular use. What about you? What's your first love?
Well, it's like asking which of your kids you like the most or something, but I enjoy, I love shotguns. They're so much fun to shoot. And I don't hunt really, so the defensive shotguns I just love. Go out and trim trees with them and just seeing how fast I can shoot them or just shooting, they're a blast. But I really, really like lever guns, and I love the old Colt single actions. I've got a bit of a collector of the Colt single actions in all generations, and then lever guns. Those are probably the most fun to me. But although I really like double action revolvers too, and I like the functionality of of even the new modern polymer 9mm or 40s or 40 whatever, the polymer pistols. Those are great because they're just so reliable and easy to shoot well. Glock 19, it's a lot of fun to shoot. But if I were stranded on an island with some ammo and 3 or 4 guns, I'm more likely going to want maybe a good double action Smith and a Colt single action and a lever gun. I'd be happier.
That's great. Well, we want you happy on that island. But you brought up something. You talked about the Glocks, and it made me flash on one of the videos that I seen where you were talking about pocket pistols. And what's not apparent in this video for viewers who need to start watching your videos and having is you're a really tall guy.
Yeah.
You are very, very tall. And so you were talking about these pocket pistols, and I just had to chuckle because they looked so small in your hands. I mean, to you they looked like they were half the size that they looked to me. But it made me think, because I know that viewers and I know this from your viewers telling me this about you, that people ask you for advice, and that you're very generous with advice, and you're a wonderful mentor to people. And I'm wondering, so there's such differences in size, and there's such differences in skill level as affects choices, like for that first gun. So you go back to something that you talked about in your early experience, that discomfort of going into a commercial gun shop to buy your first gun, and how hard that was. And I know people turn to you for guidance in that regard. How do you make that work for people, knowing such huge differences that we bring to that equation?
Well, I'm not sure. I just try to just be honest about, I try to mention in most videos probably, looking at a firearm, especially a small one, or if there's an issue with the grip, that, keep in mind. I'm constantly reminding people to keep in mind I have large hands, and 6'8", or with long guns. The reasons I put extenders on them, and that people don't like that sometimes. I have a nice Mauser or something, I put a slip on a rubber thing, adulterate the gun, but for it to feel right, I have to do that. And then with small guns and pocket guns and all that, I just try to remind people, that I have really large hands, and I'm 6'8", and you got to feel a gun. You need to try it yourself and decide. Although, on the other hand, for small guns and pocket guns and that kind of thing, I think it should be encouraging to people who think that so many of the little firearms are too small. They're too small to shoot well. And that was one of the things we tried to demonstrate early on, just as we first started this stuff. And I thought it'd be cool because I had shot enough where there's so many shooters who way outshoot me, as you all know. Y'all are experienced shooters. I'm just a pretty good backyard shooter, and I shoot a lot, so I can hit a target if it's big enough, you know. But people are a little bit more impressed than they should be with my shooting. But by the same token, I learned, I don't know, back in the 70s or whenever, early 80s, that, wow, these little J-frame revolvers and things, once I got to where I could shoot a little bit, because if you've never shot a handgun, you might not be able to hit the car. You know how that is. I mean, it's a different animal, isn't it, than a rifle. But once you get to a point where you can you can shoot pretty well, you're surprised at how well you can hit with even a J-frame or something. And so we were demonstrating that in some of these long, shooting here from the driveway at 230 yards at a large gong, but it's still 230 yards with a Glock 27. And what else did we shot several revolvers or different pistols at it, and I would just shoot. John would be behind me with the camera and make sure that everybody, we do it unedited, you know, because we don't do any hocus pocus. We're, you know, hope someone puts me out of my misery if I'm ever trying to fool people in a video. And just to show that, wow, you could hit with a Glock 27 at 230 yards. It's a large gong, but, you know, I don't know how many times I hit it in that video, 7 out of 13 or whatever, something. And so I feel like that's contributing in some ways to dispelling myths that little guns, it's amazing how well you can shoot them. And my pocket guns, my little 642, my J-frame, you know, 38 special, you name it. And I could list a lot of those guns that are really pocket guns for even other people, that you could pull them out and you can bang those same targets that I shoot all the time without any trouble if you just work with them a little bit. So, and then again, where I was getting to, even because those guns are even smaller to me than they are to you. You know, if I hand you my 642 J-frame, you know, it feels whatever it feels like to you. Well, to me, that would be like if you cut it in half almost, you know. So that should be encouraging to people I feel like, with those little firearms, that they're shootable, even with my large hands, you know. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, we just try to be real and never try to put anything over on people, and be transparent about all those things, about how we're different, and even with guns I really like, you may not like it, or guns that I don't like at all. And there's a few that I've reviewed that I just don't like, really, whether it's a Chiappa revolver. And again, I'll admit, I'm a traditionalist. At my age, you're not going to find a lot of people who grew up with a Smith & Wesson or a Colt revolver back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. They're going to get excited about a Chiappa revolver, probably. It's just that simple. And I mean, you might. I admit in the video that, yeah, it does seem to dampen recoil, having the design of it the way it is. But I don't know, it's just an ugly animal. I can't like it. You know? We're not beholden to any gun companies, and never will be. So we're able to be honest. We don't bash, you know, companies. We love all the gun companies, but we're totally honest with whatever we think about a firearm, of course. And that's one of the beauties of doing this the way we do it, and the way we've always done it. We've got some wonderful sponsors, but we've turned down sponsorship from gun companies. We just absolutely don't want to be in bed with them. And even companies we really like, you know, have been after us for years. I don't know how we'd review guns if we're getting paid by a gun company. That doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that one out.
Well, it does. It puts you in a funny position, and then there comes into that manage it, and I'm so curious how you manage the interacting with the thousands, if not millions, of subscribers who enjoy asking questions and commentary. I mean,
yeah.
Do you limit the amount of time that
Yeah.
that you spend answering your questions?
Oh, yeah.
It gets pretty extreme, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can. I tell people I skim through you know, comments. I skim through like on Facebook. Some can get me. I skim through comments, and I'll answer some. but it's really hard. I wouldn't be able to have a life if I tried to do that. You know,
No.
this is fun to do. I'm so appreciative of all the viewers and people that have given me this opportunity to shoot for a living. I mean, it was great. It was so much like if you're an avid golfer or something, you know, and you're every weekend you get away from your job, you can't wait to go golfing Saturday or whatever. And I'm not a golfer, but I know that becomes a religion too. Well, it's like if someone tapped you on the shoulder, if you're an avid golfer and you're whatever your age, 50 or 60 years old, and said, you know what, you really like golfing, and we're going to just give you a career golfing. How's that sound? You know, we're going to pay you to go golfing, quit your job. You know, that's kind of what happened to me. You know, I joke about how, you know, like the Jimmy Stewart movie, It's a Wonderful Life. There must have been some angels or somebody up there looked down on me and said, that poor schmo, he's been teaching middle school 29 years out of his career, you know, or high school and middle school, and he loves to shoot. Let's do him a favor. He deserves one, so let's just let him shoot the rest of his life and get paid to do it, you know. And so, but I can't. And so I just express appreciation all the time, and it's boy, it's heartfelt. And when I run into viewers, which is, you know, every day somewhere, when I go out, I I tell them on videos, you know, make sure you say hi. Don't ever feel like you can't come up and say hi to me. Now, we may not have an hour's chat, but I will talk to you. I genuinely appreciate them. It's not just a PR thing. They gave me this job. Isn't that terrible? You know, I have to shoot for a living, you know, and so I really appreciate it. But a couple of things, they can't come to the house. You know, we've had a few situations like that, you know, security issues, but it's been all good intentions for the most part. And then I can't answer everybody. I can't, you know, I try to skim comments, and I'll answer a question sometimes if it's, this could apply to a lot of people, you know, and it makes sense. I can get to more people that way. And we just do a lot of videos, you know, the Hickok 45 Talks channel we just started. It largely is comprised of questions I get that I know people have, and I can actually do a short video, try to make them short, answering that or just talking about that, you know, like the round in the chamber deal or whatever it might be. And then I take a license in that channel. I'm going to talk about anything I want to. I did a video on grammar recently. I just, you know, that's one place where I can talk about anything. You know, the main channel, other than on Sundays, I don't get into everything. It's mainly about guns. And then the clips channel is just John pulls out clips from old videos. That's all that is. Which is interesting because we're reliving all those videos, which is kind of nice. But it's a video I did, maybe we did 20, or not 20, but 10 years ago. And John pulls a clip out of it, and it's posted, and people see it, and they don't realize it's not new. And it's like, wow, why are you talking about that all of a sudden? It's funny. But it's all good.
The
We do a lot of
timeless Hickok
videos.
45.
Hopefully we answer everything, yeah. But
Yeah, that's
it's
great.
impossible to
Well,
talk to everybody, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it would be. And I had wanted to mention the Hickok talks because that is interesting. Some of it gets philosophical.
Mhm.
Some of it gets into Q&A, like you said, the loaded chamber question, and that's interesting because I feel like you're giving more of yourself away there. And it took me back to another balancing act that I think that many of us work with, and that's the balance between the world. I'm going to borrow David Yamani, the sociology professor's words, that gun ownership is normal and normal people own guns. So I think that that's a really important message, and you're a wonderful embodiment of that, versus that need to maintain a little bit of personal security. And I'm wondering, you know, and you said that, you know, you're a very recognizable figure, that you certainly will speak to people when they approach you in public. How do you feel like? Do you feel like you're a little bit more at risk for being so public? Do you monitor what you say?
Oh, uh, at risk for what I say, yeah, a little bit. You know, my wife and I were talking about that just the other day with, you know, with Stephanopoulos, you know, on the street. He said something and it went all over the place, you know, about the president or whatever. And the big question was whether he really meant for that to go out, or is it, and we were talking about that very thing, about how when people talk like, in a restaurant or wherever it is, I, I, I kind of myself, wherever I am, I'm not likely to say something that's, I don't know what I would say. Obviously, you're aware of it because, as I was telling her, I have a filter teaching youngsters for so many years in school where you can't back up and edit, when you're in a classroom. And so I think I developed a pretty good filter in my head. If I start, you think of a joke, oh, I can't tell that joke. These kids are 13, whatever it might be. So you
Yes.
develop that filter as you're talking on the fly, and I knock on wood. So I think when I'm just out and talking to people or at a meet and greet or whatever, I think I'm pretty good about not getting into something I shouldn't. Of course, I'm bad about just saying crazy things sometimes, but I'm not going to ever say anything that would be, I think, misinterpreted or bad about somebody. I don't ever talk about other. I'm always, unfortunately, because of that very thing, I've always been reluctant to talk about other YouTubers and or people. Um, because you know how it is. I'm aware of that when I'm talking to anybody. If I don't know them at all, and until I get to know them, like if I say something about I don't know some other YouTuber, it could be a compliment, but by the time it's put online or well, what Hickok said, or they go to their channel. Well, Hickok said you. I might be complimenting some YouTuber on how they shoot so well, or how they hold the gun, or some gun they like or don't like, or saying something sarcastic because I know that YouTuber, and joking. But by the time it gets back, that who knows how it's going to be interpreted. So I just avoid that. In fact, I filtered out. There were people that used to come on our channel when we got started. They would try to use our, and they still do, of course. They try to use our channel because we have a pretty big audience to to bash someone else in the media, some other YouTuber, that maybe has blocked them. And so we don't allow that. If we see anybody doing that, and I don't do it, and you know, I'm not perfect, so I'm not going to throw a lot of rocks around. Put it that way. Or let anybody else, if
Well,
I can avoid it, on our stage.
right, exactly. Hold them to those same standards. And it does bring up a question, and maybe this applies really more to the longer shooting programs. How much of what you do is researched or scripted out in advance? I mean, it's clear that you've chosen topics, but then is pretty much your presentation when you go on camera extemporaneous, or have you
Yeah.
worked it out ahead of time?
Can't you tell the way I ramble? Yeah. Uh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I've got notes
No.
here. The next thing. Yeah, I make some bullets sometimes that or in most of the time not much. Now, when I do research for a firearm, a new firearm that we're going to do, or something I don't know much about, I'll look up basic information on it, what I can find out about it, and I'll make some notes on. I do it on computer and then I print it out, and then I just read it. And sometimes, as you know, if you're doing some, excuse me, historical firearm, there's a lot of information there, but we're not famous for going into as much depth as, of course, like Ian on Forgotten Weapons or something. So that's not my forte, and I don't want to do that necessarily. But I want to give basic information, and I try not to have to read it or have notes. Rarely ever do, but I just study that uh, before the video, and I get in my head the things I want to share, and I want to try to remember to share, and that's pretty much the approach I take. Even if we're doing I don't know, some just talking video or like on a Sunday video, I'll have a couple, three bullet points I might want to mention. Or in those Hickok 45 talks, I might make a couple of notes about some topic. Okay, I want to remember to talk about these things, but I don't like have my notes generally or look at anything. I have learned if I try to script something, that's really annoying to me. We have done a few things. We had these things we called what do we call it? We haven't done one in a long time, but the deep woods thoughts, and we just say something semi-profound in the woods. It's kind of clever. They're very very short, 30 seconds, and some people really like those. We have done one in a while, and some of those were scripted, literally a sentence or two, and it just needed to be said exactly that way to be
Right.
funny or to be clever or something. And those are fun, but I tell you, I don't like memorizing a script at all. If it's more than just a sentence or two, it's no fun for me. And that's one reason we've been able to do this so long, because I could grab any number of firearms right now, and if you were here and say, "Could you do the filming here for me?" and or you could just tell me. You could say, "Well, you got this gun. I'd like to see you do another video with that gun and tell us a little more about it and shoot it." I could almost just go get that gun and we could just get out here with a camera and set up a couple of targets. We could do a video and just have fun shooting, and I could talk about the gun and just go with it. And that's why it's fun that way. There's not a lot of details to keep in mind usually, and no script and no editing, and it's just having fun at the range for the most part. It is a lot like what it looks like, and so it's easier to do that way. We get a lot of compliments for being wow, how do you do a 20-minute without no edits and all? Well, I like to let people think that's hard, and maybe it is to some extent for some people, but it actually, in the long run, it's easier. You've probably done videos where, of some sort perhaps, where there is a lot of editing you need to do, and you want to do this segment, and you want to get this said just right. It needs to be done just right, and then you have to redo that, and then you do another segment, and you put those pieces together, and most people have been in on something like that, and I haven't, and it's a lot of work, a lot of work,
Yes.
a lot more work than just, hey, grab the camera, let's go out and shoot, so.
Well, I think we're also benefiting from something that you've probably forgotten that you do, and that is, as a teacher, you know how to present information. And many of us watching you shoot now on Hickok 45 regular program, we don't realize that we're seeing a professional instructor presenting to us on really a kind of a technical topic without making it seem technical, and that's such a wonderful charm and such a wonderful talent. I'd like to take you back to something as we kind of come full circle on this. You mentioned blind spots, and the blind spots you mentioned were about getting obsessed about technique. Do I shoot Weaver or do I shoot isosceles? Do I insist on a Glock or do I have to have a Smith or Wesson? In your interaction with people, and I think it's got to be sometimes frustrating because we ask you such boneheaded questions sometimes. What do you think we obsess too much about?
Some things we obsess too much about, you say? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Well, speaking of bonehead questions, I taught seventh grade for about 25 years, so I know. Well, things we obsess too much about, and we all do. Men are probably the worst about that. We get into the mechanics of things, and we argue whether it's the best tennis racket or the best car, the best engine oil. Men especially can be really bad about that, and that's where a lot of it comes from, I think. I still go back. I've been involved in enough different sporting things, played basketball and shooting lots of different firearms, and I chop wood with an axe all the time, or used to more so than I do now, I guess. But the most important thing is not the axe you're using, or the firearm or the basketball. I've used that as an analogy a few times in videos. That's an extreme example, but if you're just obsessing too much about the exact firearm or the exact bullet and all those kinds of things, is it a little bit like Michael Jordan, or is it a little bit like, Michael Jordan complaining about this basketball not being as accurate as another basketball, or me or anybody, this football is not as accurate. Tom Brady could never throw this thing, straight. It could be. You've got a lopsided ball, but I mean, beyond that, the ball is fine. It's round, or it's a football. It's an NFL. But we just obsess too much about all those things, because so much, I think, it comes down to just practice and training, techniques, the mindset, as is just everything. Which even comes back to the round in the chamber business, which we know is, I don't know about professionals, what we call ourselves, but as avid firearms, carriers and all that kind of thing, we generally you know, carry around in a chamber, right? You know, you probably don't know anybody that's accomplished that does. But I have to keep in mind, I'm talking to a lot of people who don't even own a gun yet, too. You know, so I try to make things a little bit more elementary, or they're just getting into it, or they don't have a gun and may not even plan to. I don't know. I mean, you got you know, people all over the planet watching, and I hear from enough of them that I know they just don't know, and they'll ask questions, you know, and comments about, well, I've never held a gun, or I've never held a shotgun. Is that this, or they'll get mad at me for not telling them what that Glock 19 is chambered in. It's just like teaching seventh grade. You get called back to reality quite often. If you start trying to explain something about subjunctive case or something in English class, and you know, you get way over people's head in a hurry. And I bring out a Glock 19 tomorrow and do a video with it, and I just don't mention it's a 9 millimeter. And someone's going to complain that you didn't even tell us what chambering is. Okay, yeah, then that's my fault, really. In fact, I saw that on video just the other day. It was a Glock 17 or something like that. Um, you know, and you don't want to come back at them like, well, dummy, you don't know what a Glock 19 is. You know, where have you been? Well, they haven't been into guns. You know, uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, we do obsess over all those things. I think, and again, I'm not a trainer. I'm not certified. I have no real formal training at all in any of that. And I probably, I don't know, I might ruffle feathers occasionally of a trainer, probably not, because I've had a lot of them contact me and compliment me, appreciate what we do and all that. And I ran into Mossy U one time at, I guess it was the NRA meeting or shot, MRA. I was so glad to meet him. I'd never met him a few years ago. And I'm just like a kid, man. I run down the hall. I was up on a mezzanine and I said, is that Mossy? And I had never met him. And I ran down the steps. I was just like a kid, man. Chased him down and it was great to meet him. And he was familiar with me in the videos and was complimentary and everything. It's like, whew. You know, I thought, okay, someone like him probably thinks I am the biggest idiot out there. And so I try not to step on their toes and assume anything. But I do think that that a lot of people obsess way too much over some of those things we talked about. You know, the exact gun can't be a Smith and Wesson; it's got to be a Glock this, or the gun can't be bigger than this, or if you don't use this holster, you're not ready. You're not a professional. You don't know what you're doing. Or if you use a leather holster instead of a Kydex or vice versa, or you're using that hollow point instead of this one, man, where have you been? Don't you know anything? You know, when there's so many more important issues, I think, like recognizing the threat before it gets to you, for one thing. You know.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, I think that we're blessed at the network with members who take being armed seriously, and they've thought through their self-defense decisions, and they've even thought through their aftermath issues, and they've deemed it worthwhile and still in their best interest to have guns. And we all enjoy watching your take on that, because I think we do travel a parallel path. You've introduced us to a goodly number of those members, and for that, my goodness, thank you so much. Oh, it's been amazing to kind of come along in your wake and bring some of those folks into the family. That's just outstanding. What would you like network members to take away from our time together this morning?
Well, I would assume the network has a lot of new shooters as well, or new gun carriers.
A lot of people in the business.
Yeah, at
yes.
all different levels. As far as, well, first of all, I didn't say, but hi to everybody, that may not be familiar with our videos, and appreciate them watching them. And again, I guess I've said it, I don't consider myself an expert in any of these specific areas. I just have been messing with firearms so long, and I have thought through a lot of these things, and I've read a lot of the experts. And that's like, yeah, I stayed in the Holiday Inn, so I know all this. But no, I have read a lot, and I've thought about it seriously. I think I have some common sense about most things. So I feel like I kind of understand the priorities, and like the people on the board we talked about, Mossy, even others, that they know this stuff. They've done training, and they've been in courtrooms And it's just so important to think through that stuff. And I think anybody that, especially in, like you say, in the network, they're carrying guns, right? All your network members are carrying a firearm, and they likely already understand and appreciate the importance of that, the seriousness of that, and are not cavalier about it. Hopefully, and that's the thing I like to always stress, that it is so serious, and and if they're a member, they're already have seen hopefully all those wonderful videos. I watched every minute of those, and out in the barn on my my DVD player, or whatever, I played them out there when I first joined, and I just went through all of them. I think I went through them twice. I was just so impressed with all those presentations, and those reminders are just so important that this is really serious business. And I worry about sometimes people, we all would, people who are new to firearms and they've just not been introduced to some of those folks, Tom Givens, or Moss, you and others, and you and Marty and everybody. Uh, they've not, maybe they haven't, especially with constitutional carry, they've not even gone through maybe a permit course, and been frightened a little bit. I think it's important. I remember that tape that they used to show, at least in Tennessee, I guess they still do, when you get your carry permit, of the attorney talking for about 20 minutes about, by the time you watch that, you go, whoa, I'm not sure I want this permit or not, or to carry this gun or not. And I think we all need that, to be reminded how serious it is, and how you really have to think through and walk through this, and what situations might arise where you would even think about pulling a firearm, because it's so serious. But again, people in your network, they're thinking through that very seriously right now, as they're maybe watching those videos as we speak, and that's a value, of course, being exposed to people that know what they're talking about. Moss Ube doesn't know anything, but he acts like he does, right? Oh, I love him.
I'll tell him you
Yeah,
said that. He's
John
great.
and I just love him. John's hard to please. He just loves Mossy. And
Aw.
I read the In the Gravest Extreme back when it came out. I guess I ran across it in a bookstore, thankfully, in Nashville, or a gun shop in Nashville, and I was so impressed with his approach, that if anybody has a right to be kind of macho, it's him, right? He bought a black belt, as well as he can outshoot most people on the planet. And I remember that, I think it was in that book, where he talked about walking the streets of New York and keeping some money in his pocket in a wad. Back when the 70s or whenever, when you were robbed every block. I guess it's getting that way again, maybe. And he had a gun, but he would pull out that he keep some bills. I forgot how much, $50 or something, and say, "Here, just take this and go on your way, and don't bother me," or whatever. And he would be criticized as being a wimp for doing that. Whereas I don't know, that might be a smart approach right there. You're avoiding serious confrontation, perhaps, and for the price of $50 or $20, it might be worth it, especially knowing he could kill him if he wanted to, probably. But in other words, walk softly and carry a big stick. That personified that, I thought. But anyway, it's good to give exposure to that.
It, it is, and I love it that you've got that side, and I love beginning to see more and more of that come out in the talks videos. We'll definitely link to all of those different things that you do in our show notes, because I think that thinking side of you is perhaps a side that your fans don't know as well, and I think that I think that it underscores what a wonderful ambassador you are and have been for many years for what we do, and to normalizing us as gun owners, but also making us stop and think. So for that, sir, I thank you.
Well,
It's been great talking to you this morning. I thank you for your time today, and my goodness, if there's anything the network can ever do for Hickok 45 or the channel, you have only to reach out to us, because we're fans too.
Well,
we're
thank
fans
you. I
too.
appreciate it. I appreciate it. Good to talk to you. Hope to see you again at the NRA meeting or somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was great that year. I got to meet you and John. I went home and said, I'd never seen two such big fellas.
That's right. We're both 6'8".
Oh, you are. Yeah, that was wonderful.